The rain was relentless, hammering the pavement outside the Brooklyn diner where I worked, each drop a reminder of how trapped I felt. My name is Caleb Torres, a 27-year-old barista scraping by in New York City, and tonight, like most nights, I was drowning in my own thoughts. Then he walked in, Elliot Grant, my boss, the man who turned my world upside down with a single glance. Elliot wasn't your typical diner owner. At 29, he carried himself with a quiet intensity, his dark eyes always seeming to see more than you wanted to reveal. His black skin glowed under the diner's fluorescent lights, and his short dreadlocks framed a face that could shift from stern to warm in a heartbeat. He'd taken over the diner, Sonny's, 2 years ago, transforming it from a greasy spoon into a haven for misfits like me. I'd been working for him for a year, and every shift felt like a tightrope walk between professionalism and something dangerously unspoken. That night, the diner was dead, the storm keeping customers away. I was wiping down the counter, my hands moving on autopilot, when Elliot emerged from the back office, his sweater sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms that made my pulse stutter. "Caleb," he said, his voice low, "you're off in 10. I'll drive you home. Streets are a mess out there." His tone was casual, but the way his eyes lingered on me felt like a question I wasn't ready to answer. I nodded, my throat tight. I lived in a cramped apartment in Bed-Stuy, a 20-minute walk from Sonny's, and the idea of being alone with Elliot in his car sent a thrill through me I couldn't name. I'd always known I was gay, but growing up in a conservative Puerto Rican family in the Bronx had taught me to bury that truth deep. Elliot, though, had a way of unearthing things. The way he'd brush past me in the kitchen, the way he'd ask about my day like he actually cared, it was unraveling me, piece by piece. 10 minutes later, we were in his beat-up Jeep, the rain blurring the world outside. The silence between us was heavy, charged, like the air before a lightning strike. "You okay?" he asked, glancing at me as he navigated the flooded streets. His voice was soft, but it carried weight, like he knew I was carrying more than just the weight of a long shift. "I'm fine," I lied, staring out the window. My life was a mess. Bills piling up, my family's expectations suffocating me, and this growing ache for a man I couldn't have. Elliot was my boss, and for all I knew, he was straight. But the way he looked at me sometimes, like he was searching for something, made me question everything. We pulled up to my building, a crumbling brownstone with a flickering streetlight out front. I expected him to say goodnight, but instead he turned off the engine. "Mind if I come up?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. My heart stopped. I should have said no, should have kept the lines clear, but I didn't. I nodded, and he followed me up the creaking stairs to my tiny apartment. Inside, the place was a mess. Dishes in the sink, laundry spilling out of a basket, but Elliot didn't seem to notice. He stood in my kitchen, looking too big for the space, his presence filling every corner. "You got coffee?" he asked, a half-smile tugging at his lips. I laughed, nervous, and pointed to the cheap instant stuff on the counter. He grabbed it, his fingers brushing mine as he handed me a mug, and I swear the room tilted. We talked about the diner, about music, about nothing and everything. The rain kept falling outside, a steady rhythm that matched the thump of my heart. Then, out of nowhere, he set his mug down and stepped closer, his eyes locked on mine. "Caleb," he said, his voice rough, "I need to tell you something." My breath caught. The kitchen felt too small, the air too thick. I wanted to run, to hide from whatever he was about to say, but I couldn't move. His hand reached out, hovering near my arm, and I felt the weight of 1,000 unsaid words between us. "I've been watching you," he said, his voice low, almost a confession. Not just at work. I see you, Caleb. The way you carry everyone else's weight. The way you smile when you're breaking inside. I can't stop seeing you. I froze, my mind screaming that this was a mistake, that he couldn't mean what I thought he meant. But his eyes, they were raw, unguarded, and for the first time, I saw the man behind the boss. A man who was just as scared as I was. Elliot, I started, my voice shaking. You don't know what you're saying. I do, he said, stepping closer. So close I could feel the warmth of him. I've known for months. I just didn't know how to say it. Before I could respond, his hand touched my arm, gentle but firm, and the world fell away. The rain, the diner, my fears. They all vanished in the heat of that moment. I wanted to lean into him, to let go of the walls I'd built, but something held me back. My family's voices echoed in my head, their disapproval a shadow I couldn't shake. Then my phone buzzed, shattering the moment. It was a text from my sister, Maria. Mommy's asking about you. You coming to church this Sunday? The guilt hit like a punch, and I stepped back, my hands slipping from Elliot's grasp. I can't do this, I whispered, my voice barely audible over the rain. Elliot's face fell, but he didn't push. He just nodded, his eyes full of something that looked like regret. I'll see you at work, he said, and then he was gone, leaving me alone in the kitchen with the ghost of his touch. That night, I lay awake, replaying every word, every look. What he did in that kitchen, those words, that touch, haunted me not because it was wrong, but because it felt so right, and I was terrified of what that meant. The next morning, I woke to the weight of what happened. My apartment still smelling faintly of Elliot's cologne. I dragged myself to Sonny's, my stomach in knots, unsure if I could face him. The diner was already buzzing when I arrived, the breakfast rush in full swing, but Elliot was nowhere in sight. Where's the boss? I asked Tara, the head waitress, a 32-year-old black woman with a sharp wit and a knack for reading people. She raised an eyebrow, wiping her hands on her apron. He called in sick. First time in forever. You know anything about that, Caleb? Her tone was teasing, but her eyes were too knowing. I shrugged, my face burning, and busied myself with the coffee machine. The day dragged on, each hour heavier than the last. I kept replaying last night, Elliot's confession, the way his hand felt on my arm, the way I'd pushed him away. I wanted to text him, to apologize, but every time I pulled out my phone, I froze. What could I say? That I was scared? That I wanted him but didn't know how to let myself have him? By closing time, I was a wreck. Tara lingered as I locked up, her gaze softening. You're not yourself today, kid, she said, leaning against the counter. Want to talk about it? I shook my head, but the words spilled out anyway. It's Elliot. He said something last night. Something big. Tara's eyes widened, but she didn't look surprised. About time, she muttered, then caught my confused look. Oh, come on, Caleb. The man's been mooning over you for months. Everyone sees it but you. Everyone. I choked out, my heart racing. Pretty much, she said with a grin. He's not exactly subtle. The way he watches you when you're steaming milk, like you're the only person in the room. I felt exposed, like the diner's walls were closing in. I don't know what to do, I admitted. My family, they'd never understand. And he's my boss. This could ruin everything. Tara sighed, her expression turning serious. Caleb, you can't live for other people's approval. You'll lose yourself that way. Trust me, I've been there. She didn't elaborate, but the weight in her voice told me she'd fought her own battles. Her words stuck with me as I walked home, the city alive with lights and noise. I wanted to believe her, to believe I could be brave enough to face this, but the fear was a living thing, clawing at my chest. My family was my anchor, but they were also my cage. Every Sunday, I sat through sermons that called people like me sinners, and every time, I felt a piece of myself chip away. When I got home, I found a note slipped under my door. It was in Elliot's handwriting, simple and unadorned. "I'm sorry if I crossed a line. I meant every word." My hands trembled as I read it, the words searing into me. I wanted to call him, to tell him I felt the same, but the weight of my family, my job, my entire life held me back. The next day, Elliot was back at the diner, but he was different, distant, professional. He barely looked at me, and when he did, his eyes were guarded. It hurt more than I expected, like a piece of me had been carved out. I threw myself into work, trying to drown out the ache, but every time he passed by, I felt the pull of him, like gravity. That night, as we closed up, I couldn't take it anymore. "Elliot," I said, catching him by the office door, "can we talk?" He hesitated, then nodded, leading me to the empty kitchen. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting stark shadows. "I'm sorry," I blurted out, "for pushing you away. I'm scared." He looked at me, his expression softening. "I get it, Caleb. I do. I've been there. But I can't keep pretending I don't feel this." Before I could respond, the diner's phone rang, shrill and insistent. Elliot sighed and answered it, his face darkening as he listened. "It's my brother," he said, hanging up. "He's in trouble. I gotta go." He grabbed his jacket and paused, looking back at me. "We're not done here, Caleb. Not by a long shot." As he left, I stood alone in the kitchen, the echo of his words mingling with the memory of that night. I knew then that whatever this was, it was bigger than my fear, and I wasn't sure I could outrun it anymore. Elliot's absence the next day felt like a void. Tara said he'd called to say he'd be out for a few days, dealing with family issues. I wanted to text him to check if he was okay, but every draft I typed felt wrong. Instead, I buried myself in work, pouring coffee and plastering on a smile, but my mind was elsewhere. That afternoon, a new customer walked in. A man in his early 30s, white, with a sharp jawline and an expensive coat. He introduced himself as Nathan, a friend of Elliot's from college. His easy charm and probing questions set me on edge. "So you're Caleb," he said, leaning back in his booth. "Elliot talks about you. A lot." I froze, my hand mid-wipe on the counter. "What did he say?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Nathan smirked, his eyes glinting. "Just that you're special. He's got it bad, doesn't he?" I didn't know how to respond, so I didn't. Nathan lingered, ordering coffee after coffee, his gaze too sharp, like he was sizing me up. When he finally left, he slipped me his card. "If Elliot's ever too much, give me a call," he said, winking. I shoved the card in my pocket, unsettled. That night I couldn't sleep. Nathan's words echoed in my head, mingling with Elliot's confession. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, one step away from falling. The next morning, I found Elliot back at the diner, but he looked worn, his eyes shadowed. "You okay?" I asked, cornering him by the coffee machine. He sighed, running a hand over his face. "My brother, Jamal. He's in deep with some bad people. I'm trying to help him, but it's complicated." I wanted to ask more, but the pain in his voice stopped me. Instead, I touched his arm, a mirror of that night in my kitchen. "If you need me, I'm here," I said, surprising myself with the words. He looked at me, his eyes softening. "Thanks, Caleb. That means more than you know." The rest of the week was a blur of stolen glances and unspoken words. Elliot was distracted, his phone buzzing constantly, but every time our eyes met, I felt that pull again, stronger than ever. On Friday, he asked me to stay late to help with inventory. I agreed, my heart pounding. We worked in silence, the diner empty except for us. As we counted boxes in the storeroom, his hand brushed mine, and I didn't pull away. He froze, his eyes searching mine. "Caleb," he said, his voice raw, "I don't want to push you, but I can't stop feeling this." I swallowed, my heart racing. "I feel it too," I admitted, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "But I'm terrified, Elliot. My family, my life. It's all so messed up." He stepped closer, his hand cupping my face. "We'll figure it out," he said. "Together." Before I could respond, he kissed me, soft and tentative, like he was afraid I'd break. I didn't. I kissed him back, pouring all my fear and longing into it, and for a moment, the world made sense. But then the back door slammed open, and Nathan stood there, his eyes dark with something I couldn't name. "Well, isn't this cozy?" he said, his voice dripping with venom. Elliot pulled back, his jaw tight. "What are you doing here, Nathan?" Nathan smirked, stepping closer. "Just checking on my old friend and his employee." The air turned cold, and I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the open door. Nathan's presence was a threat, though I didn't know why. As he left, his parting words lingered. "Be careful, Elliot. Not everyone's as accepting as you think." Nathan's visit left a shadow over the diner. Elliot was on edge, his usual warmth replaced by a guarded tension. I wanted to ask about Nathan, about his brother, about everything, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, we fell into a fragile rhythm, stealing moments when no one was looking. A brush of hands, a shared smile. Each one felt like a rebellion against the fear clawing at me. On Sunday, I went to church with my family, the familiar weight of guilt settling in my chest. My mother's eyes were sharp, her questions about my life pointed. "You're working too much, Caleb," she said, her voice heavy with disapproval. "You need to focus on what's right." I nodded, my throat tight, but all I could think about was Elliot's kiss, the way it had felt like coming home. I wanted to tell her, to scream that I was in love, but the words stayed locked inside. Back at the diner, things took a darker turn. Elliot got a call that made his face go pale. "It's Jamal," he said, his voice shaking. "He's missing." I followed him to his car, refusing to let him face this alone. We drove to a rundown part of the city, where Elliot's brother had last been seen. The streets were grim, lined with boarded-up buildings and flickering streetlights. Elliot was quiet, his hands gripping the wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. "Jamal's been in trouble before," he said finally. "Drugs, bad debts." I thought I could pull him out, but now his voice broke, and I reached for his hand, squeezing it. "We'll find him," I said, though I had no idea how. We spent hours searching, talking to shady contacts and dodging questions from cops. Every dead end chipped away at Elliot's hope, and I hated how helpless I felt. When we finally stopped at a diner to regroup, Elliot looked at me, his eyes raw. "I don't deserve you," he said. "You shouldn't be dragged into this. I'm here because I want to be," I said, my voice fierce. "I'm not going anywhere." He kissed me then, right there in the booth, not caring who saw. It was desperate, hungry, like he was holding on to me for dear life. When we pulled apart, I saw something in his eyes, hope, maybe, or something close to it. But the next day, Nathan was back at Sonny's, his smile too sharp. "Heard about your brother," he said to Elliot, his tone mocking. "Shame. You should have kept him on a tighter leash." Elliot's fists clenched, but he didn't rise to the bait. "Get out," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Nathan laughed, but he left, his parting glance at me chilling. I knew then that he wasn't just a jealous friend. He was dangerous, and he knew too much. That night, Elliot took me to his place, a small apartment in Williamsburg. We sat on his couch, the city lights glittering outside. "Nathan's got ties to the people Jamal owes," he said, his voice heavy. "He's been using me to get to him, and now he knows about us." The weight of his words hit me. Nathan wasn't just a threat to Elliot's brother, he was a threat to us, to this fragile thing we were building. I wanted to run, to hide, but Elliot's hand found mine, grounding me. "We'll face it together," he said, echoing his words from the storeroom. And for the first time, I believed him. The next week was a storm of fear and hope. Elliot got a lead on Jamal, a tip that he was hiding out in an abandoned warehouse. We went together, my heart pounding as we navigated the dark, graffiti-covered halls. We found Jamal, bruised but alive, and Elliot's relief was palpable as he hugged his brother. But the danger wasn't over. Nathan had been trailing us, and as we left the warehouse, he was there, flanked by two men who looked like they meant business. "You should have stayed out of it, Elliot," Nathan said, his voice cold. "And you," he turned to me, "you're in way over your head." Elliot stepped in front of me, his body tense. "Leave him out of this," he said, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. Nathan laughed, but before he could say more, Jamal stepped forward, his voice shaking but firm. "I'm done running, Nathan. I'll pay what I owe. Just leave my brother alone." The standoff was tense, the air thick with the threat of violence. But Nathan, sensing the shift, backed off, his men following. "This isn't over," he said, his eyes lingering on me. Back at Elliot's apartment, we were shaken but whole. Jamal crashed on the couch, and Elliot and I stood in his kitchen, the same place where this had all started. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice raw. "I dragged you into this mess." "You didn't drag me anywhere," I said, stepping closer. "I chose this. I chose you." He looked at me, his eyes full of everything we'd been through. Fear, pain, love. "I don't know what I did to deserve you," he said, pulling me into his arms. We kissed, slow and deep, the weight of the past weeks melting away. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and for the first time I wasn't afraid of what came next. In the weeks that followed, we rebuilt. Jamal got clean, Elliot hired a lawyer to deal with Nathan's threats, and I started opening up to my family, one painful conversation at a time. My mother didn't understand, not yet, but she listened, and that was a start. The diner became our sanctuary, a place where we could be ourselves. Tara threw us a mock wedding with a cake she baked herself, and the regulars cheered as we cut it, laughing through tears. What happened in that kitchen that night still haunts me, not because it was wrong, but because it changed everything. It taught me that love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice, a fight, a promise to face the world together, no matter what. And with Elliot by my side, I was ready for whatever came next.